Remember, do not underestimate the power of PlayStation.
I miss Charlotte terribly, you know. She really was my better half. She stopped me from putting some of my crazier plans into action. Lucas, I'm so sorry I got us into this mess.
Yeah, me too.
Knack. Just keep saying that name, Knack. It's not really appealing, it just feels like it takes some weird, unappealing effort to say. Knack. Knack was a PS4 launch game from the mind of technical genius Mark Cerny and Sony's Japan studio, whose reputation should precede them. Cerny contributed to franchises like Spyro, Crash, Jak and Daxter, Ratchet & Clank, and Uncharted, while Japan Studio worked on games like Ape Escape, Legend of Dragoon, and collaborated with other studios on games like Shadow of the Colossus and Rogue Galaxy. They have quite an impressive pedigree built up. Knack was intended to be a colorful alternative to the darker, more adult titles the PS4 was debuting with, as well as being a bit of a technical showcase for the system with all of the processing needed to keep up with Knack the character. There's not a crazy amount of development history out there, so let's just get right into it. Knack the game is a linear beat-em-up with some light platforming elements. I've heard a ton of people refer to this game as a character-based platformer, but it really feels more like a 3D take on classic side-scrolling beat-em-ups, to me. Levels are mostly incredibly straight, narrow lines that branch out into larger, empty areas to beat up bad guys in, sometimes with a few traps set up along the way here and there. The level design isn't particularly thought-provoking or engaging for the most part, though there are some instances that hand you bottomless pits to avoid or light platforming obstacles to overcome, which naturally should help to highlight a fun, well-rounded combat system when the focus isn't on the level design, right? Well, no. Knack attacks with the square button with an incredibly basic combo, and that's about it. You can jump and do a sort of Sonic the Hedgehog-esque homing attack, and you can use a dodge with the right stick that leads into a single punch, and that's mostly it. Sometimes you're allowed to grab objects like tanks to throw at enemies, and you do have some meters that you can fill up to execute special attacks, but I felt that for as long as Knack the game is, the combat was incredibly simple. Even that necessarily wouldn't be too awful of a thing. You can assume by the game's graphical style and story presentation that it's more for children, but damn is this game hard! I started on normal difficulty and found myself continually destroyed in the game's first level. Now hey, I make no claims to be a good gamer. I had no shame in bumping the game down to easy difficulty, and even then it felt like what should have been this game's default normal level. Enemies hit hard, I mean sometimes they nearly one-shot you. Frankly, this game feels like it's for kids when you're looking at it from a distance, but pick up that controller and even adults will be tested more than they'd like. Which makes this game incredibly hard to recommend to either demographic. Kids may like the cute, easy-on-the-eye aesthetics, but find the game to be way too hard. And adults might find that visual style to be a bit bland, and not find enough depth in the combat system to justify the difficulty. It's a weird mix that attempts to cater to everyone, but it just kind of falls flat no matter who it's reaching to, I think. Now let's talk Knack's big draw. See, in this game's universe, things are powered by relics, little block-like things excavated from the earth. Knack was discovered amongst some, and can use them to sort of magnetize to his body to increase in size. At first thought, you might hope that this leads to some Katamari Damacy-esque mechanic where you're continually growing bigger and bigger to wreak more and more havoc, but you'll only grow big when the game wants you to. It's very scripted. Not to mention that these relics can be sparingly found in most levels. Sometimes you'll collect a bunch and see a minuscule upgrade to your size and health bar, if at all, and when the game wants you to be big, you'll grow huge and get a larger health bar from the same amount of relics. So it's all ultimately worthless, basically. Alright, so let's just generalize and say there are a few tiers to enemies. Small, medium, large. Their damage output scales with you. When you get to a medium size, you'll encounter medium enemies who do the same damage to you that small enemies would do when you're small. This effectively means that proportions are just for show, since the game generally just hands you enemies scaled to the size it wants you to be. Every now and then you'll get to thrash tiny enemies when you're huge, and it's one of the few times in the game you'll feel like you've made any form of advancement, but such moments are rare. I've been neglecting to mention something else you can do in Knack. Now, occasionally there are hidden areas that you can break into that hold a treasure. These are, assumedly, randomly generated items that, when combined, turn into a device Knack can, air quote, equip that enhance his abilities. One tells you when you're near a secret room, another gives Knack more special move energy, etc. I felt like I did a fantastic job of finding these areas throughout Knack, and I still only managed to complete 2 devices. I'm unsure if you need to replay the game to unlock the rest, as I didn't really seem to get many duplicates, or if I somehow missed a ton of secret rooms. I think there was also a mobile app for the game that would let you unlock some of these things, but I didn't get to try that while I had access to the game. It's a shame that these gameplay modifiers are all hidden away instead of some being given to you from the start, as they seemed like decent attempts to help shake up Knack's gameplay a bit. And it's not that the game doesn't try. Sometimes you'll become crystal clear to do some extremely light stealth sections, or you'll get wood materials and you have to rush from health drop to health drop if you catch on fire, because, you'll be burning. But all of these things just can't save what's an otherwise uninteresting, overly hard experience. That's the most I'd like to say about Knack's gameplay. I did not enjoy it. I played through the entire game just to see how the game would try and mix it up, but ultimately I walked away negative about my experience. It's a shame to see such a neat idea for a game coming from such established people get stretched out into a long, boring expanse. But I'll just comment on the game's presentation now to wrap this up. The game's visual style is pleasant, outdoor areas are bright and colorful with a very rounded style, and caves tend to wind up a bit dull, especially since you're in so many, but Knack really isn't a bad looking game at all. Performance-wise, I found the frame rate stuttered quite a bit, which is ironic considering what the game set out to accomplish, but weirdly it seemed to fluctuate between 30 to 40 frames per second. Maybe I'm crazy, I felt like it never dipped below 30. I felt like if they had tried to just lock this to 30, it might have actually helped it some. As far as the musical score goes, I can't remember a single piece of music, so I'm assuming it was going for a more recent film style of serving as a backdrop instead of trying to stand out, meaning that it did do its job. Now, there is a story here about humans versus goblins, and Knack being a secret key to unlock something that brings about the end of the world, but it's hard to care, and I wasn't anticipating gripping, well-made narrative anyway. The surprise villain is always obviously a villain, yet he never makes it clear what he's trying to do. The good character doctor misses his decades-dead wife, who, spoilers, is alive and helping the goblins construct technology, and Knack barely does anything, but goddamn does he sound sexy!
Well, I brought a few of my security robots with me. If Knack can get by those, then I'll grant he has a place in the expedition.
Can do. Let's take this to the garden. There's a bit more room.
Seriously, why does Knack sound so sexy? Hamina. For real though, Knack just feels like an accessory to the story. He doesn't seem to have his own thoughts or motives or anything. He's just sort of a yes man who does as he's told. I was hoping to get any sort of character arc with Knack, because there's a goblin like halfway through the game that asks why he fights for the humans, and there's a stage in a human city where people are clearly freaking out over this giant monster. It would have been predictable and ham-fisted as anything to have Knack question his allegiance and perhaps do a temporary turn against the humans, but at least it would have been something to Knack as a character. Knack just does these things because why not? But again, the story doesn't really matter, and frankly not much of Knack does. It's just unfortunate that the game attempts to present a narrative you should care about and falls flat. However, it seems we might possibly hear about a Knack 2 at E3, or maybe later on, so I'm hopeful for the future of this potential series. I think Sony needs more colorful games like this under their belt, and while I'd much rather see this funding and development time go to proven series, such as say Ape Escape, it'd also be a shame for a cool idea like Knack to die with this game. Fingers crossed for the next one, if it happens. Until then, I can't really recommend this game to anyone, though. It's an interesting kind of curiosity in the PlayStation 4 launch, but otherwise, I just don't bother. This has been Mikonos Fan. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Learning to Love PlayStation.